This panel series is presented in collaboration with Graduate and Postdoctoral Studies and by the TRaCE McGill Project. This event will begin with a panel session moderated by Daneese Rao. Daneese graduated from McGill with a BA in History in 2019 and completed an MA in History in the summer of 2020, with a focus on 20th century American social history. Daneese is currently the Student Life Coordinator at the Postgraduate Student Society, PGSS. Before we begin, I'd like to ask you to please hold your questions for the Q&A portion after the panel and place them in the chat. The panel session will feature 4 of our alumni, followed by a breakout room session featuring both current students and alumni from diverse disciplines to best answer your questions. With us tonight is the Dean of Graduate and Postdoctoral Studies, Dr. Josephine Nalbantoglu. Thank you so much for being here with us. And without further ado, I would like to invite Dr. Nalbantoglu to start us off with a few words.
Thank you very much. I am very pleased to be here. This is the first event that we're doing with graduates, with alumni, and in collaboration with the University Advancement. We decided to do this because we thought we were throwing a lot of workshops and student engagement activities at everybody. Like, we went overboard with everything that we organized during winter term, during the summer, and we thought maybe we could put you in contact with the recent graduates, those who attended McGill when there was no pandemic, right? So that they can really tell you about their McGill experience. So I'm looking forward to listening to the panel and to see what's going to happen. And I think we're going to have a really interesting hour and a half. Thank you very much.
All right, so let's get started. We have some amazing folks with us here tonight, so I'm going to introduce them all and then we'll dive into the questions. So first we have Sahil Kumar, who earned a BSc in 2014 and an MSc in 2016. Sahil is a graduate of the Division of Experimental Medicine. While at McGill, they were elected to the student leadership positions on this Science Undergraduate Society, the Postgraduate Student Society, and played an active role in improving the Orientation Week experience at both the undergraduate and postgraduate levels. Sahil is a recipient of the McGill Scarlet Key Award and the Chancellor Greta Chambers Student Leadership Award. Sahil currently lives, works, and studies as a Doctor of Medicine candidate on the unceded traditional lands of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh Nations in Vancouver, British Columbia. And next we have Emmanuella Lambropoulos, who earned an MA in 2020. Emmanuella is a member of Parliament for the electoral district of Saint Laurent. She received her Bachelor of Education from McGill University in 2013 and began her teaching career. And in 2014, she entered the Masters of Arts in Education Leadership program at McGill and attended on a part-time basis while teaching. In 2017, Emmanuella was elected to the House of Commons and put school on hold for a year, but was determined to complete the degree that she had started, and she graduated from the program in May of 2020. So congratulations to you. Next, we have Zehra Rizvi, who earned an MSc in 2011. Zehra obtained a BA in International Studies from the University of Saskatchewan and an MSc in Integrated Water Resource Management from McGill University. She published her research on First Nation capacity in Quebec to practice integrated water resources management in the International Journal of Water. She's a research analyst at Plan International, an international development organization which works in 71 countries across the world to advance children's rights and equality for girls. As well, she's a professional photographer. She is a board member of the Saskatoon Open Door Society, a nonprofit that provides settlement services to immigrants and refugees. And then last but certainly not least, we have Kori St-Cyr, who earned a Master's of Applied Science in 2011. Kori is an alumni of McGill, having completed a Master's of Applied Science in Biotechnology in 2011. While at McGill, Kori founded BioConnect, McGill's first biotechnology graduate student conference. And since leaving McGill, Kori has worked at the Interface of Science, Partnership Development, and Public Policy, and has led and designed research projects in diverse subject areas, including Canada's science and technology performance, the role of ICTs in advancing sustainability, the future of policing, and advancing gender equality in university research. Kori is currently a senior strategist with the National Sciences and Engineering Research Council of Canada, the major federal agency responsible for funding natural sciences and engineering research in Canada. Thank you all for being here. We're really looking forward to having you share your experiences. And with that being said, I am going to jump into the first question. So if you could tell us a little bit about what your graduate experience at McGill was like and what you enjoyed the most and also what you found most challenging. Why don't we start with Emmanuella?
Hello, everyone. So I really enjoyed my graduate experience at McGill. It was basically an extension of the bachelor's, except that it was part-time and I was doing it while working full-time, which obviously had its challenges. I guess the thing I liked the most was the fact that I was learning about educational leadership while I was working in high schools. And so especially while I was still teaching, it was very relevant, and it gave me ways of thinking about how things were being done at the schools that I was working at, and gave me ideas of how I would be able to change that one day and how I can improve schools one day. And just allowed me to formulate my thoughts, better formulate my thoughts around education in general. And it opened my mind to the different pathways that I could take. So believe it or not, one of my teachers at McGill had discussed policy within education. And I know that I'm at the federal level and it has nothing to do with education, but we had discussed the role that policymakers play in education. And I had expressed my interest in politics as well at the time to this professor, who at one point said, maybe you can one day be the education minister at the provincial level. And that was something that had already entered my mind in the past. And while I'm not at that level of government right now, I do think that it's something that, who knows, we never know what might happen in the future. And so McGill kind of allowed me to have this more open mind of where the future could lead me and where things could take me in the future. So right now I'm in politics. It has nothing to do with what I studied. However, I'm thinking of opening a business within education as well. And my mind has never really stopped. And I think that the master's program is what kind of jump-started a lot of the different opportunities that I see for myself. And it's not just like a one path option. There are several paths that I see have opened up for me because of this experience. And it's something that I strongly encourage everyone to do, just because it's never going to lead you to only one place. It's going to open your mind and open your doors, and you're going to find creative ways of using whatever skills you acquire and whatever degree you earn. So I guess that's what I like the most.
Kori?
Sure, thanks. Like Emmanuel, I thoroughly enjoyed my time at McGill. I think besides Montreal being an amazing city to live in, I also really enjoyed the interdisciplinary nature of my program. And so my program, the Master's of Science in Biotechnology, afforded me the opportunity to learn how to isolate DNA during the day. And then at night, I was taking management classes with individuals in the MBA program. And so here I was trying to practice to be CSI during the day, but at night I had an opportunity to learn how to launch a new venture, how to raise funds using venture capitalism. And so being able to bring both of those worlds together, interact with both of those worlds, and see the differences and benefits from both of them, I think was incredibly helpful for me. Perhaps one of the challenging things for me when I was at McGill was actually related to that interdisciplinary nature. And I think a lot of it had to do with trying to navigate having to take courses in multiple faculties. For the most part, my home faculty was the Faculty of Agriculture and Environmental Sciences. And so it was quite easy to conduct courses in that particular faculty. But when it was time for me to take some of the classes in the MBA program or take some of the classes in the experimental medicine program, you had to learn how to navigate that space a bit more effectively. There were several of us who took on that challenge because we were super excited in ensuring that our program was very interdisciplinary in nature. And so it worked out, but it was certainly a challenge for us, but it was certainly an opportunity that helped to propel me in my career to be able to see how you could blend science and policy and business all together in order to create sustainable change within the country.
Thank you. Sahil, do you want to go next?
Sure, thank you. I think it's so exciting to hear these other aspects of people's McGill's experiences. I think mine was something that I've always kept throughout what I've done post-university. So I came into the master's program after having finished my bachelor's also at McGill. So for me, I felt very comfortable on campus. I felt I'd always been involved with doing undergraduate societies. And so going into graduate school, it was like a no-brainer to get involved with PGSS and to get involved in my departmental association. I think the great thing was also getting to finally be able to go to Thompson House as a graduate student and being able to experience that. I think a big challenge for me in the middle of my degree was our move to the Glen. So I was in the year where we were moving from an on-campus lab to the MUHC Research Institute at the Glen campus. So for us, we were no longer going to be on campus. A lot of my identity with McGill was being on Lower Field and being able to kind of go around campus and go to Thompson House and all these things. And now we were almost shuttled off into to Vendôme Metro. So it was a big transition for us. I think we found our own little niche there, and it was always a great time to explore a new part of the city. I think some of the other things that I kind of figured out was that life outside of school kind of continues, and it's important to check in when those big stressors really hit. I was lucky enough to have really great lab mates and friends that were very supportive and helped me out through the entire process. And I think probably the best part of living in Montreal was always being able to go to a terrace and have a terrace therapy and just kind of catch up with some friends and have a drink. But definitely, I know it's a little bit difficult not having these things now and being able to go in person. But something to always look forward to is the OAP on Lower Campus, which is the open air pub held by the engineers. Being able to skate on the lower field rink during the winters, and also checking out every single library study space. As a grad student, you also get your own desk if you want it. So definitely some perks to think about.
Zehra?
Yeah, thank you. This is a great conversation. What I loved most about McGill is probably what you don't even notice that you will benefit from. I'm a grad that's 10 years out. It's the social network. So the friends that I made are really lifelong. We still text and call each other. We still talk about career and what's happening in our lives. And that's such a benefit from McGill, is that you get this exposure to people that maybe you would not have crossed paths with. So I'm always grateful for that. And things that are challenging is, doing a master's is a roller coaster. You get in and it's really exciting, and then you got to do a lit review and you got to navigate complex relationships with supervisors and participants for your project. I think always just to know that you belong, and that's really important, because everybody goes through this imposter syndrome of feeling like you're not good enough. Or for myself, I was not a science major in my undergrad, and here I was pursuing like engineering sciences for a master's. And there was a couple of us that were in that same scenario. But it was amazing because I was in an environment where we would do group projects and collaborate. And the expectation from my professors was sort of that, you're capable of learning it and then you're going to teach it. And because the expectation kind of wasn't, you kind of felt that was expectations, you actually were able to deliver. So it was wonderful for our confidence that you're kind of capable of navigating and pivoting all of life's problems as they arise.
Great, thank you. And I think our next question dovetails really well with something that Emmanuella mentioned. So of course, grad school can be really demanding. I think the roller coaster is a good metaphor. People have a lot of different roles and a lot of different hats they wear, whether that be related to family commitments, work commitments, or otherwise. And what advice would you give to students about managing a work-life balance during graduate school? Why don't we start off in reverse order? So Zehra, if you want to take it away for us.
Yeah, absolutely. Graduate school is all consuming. It's all hands in, and anyone that's like, has a family and going to graduate school or still working full time, kudos to you. But it's definitely very stressful. There's a lot of anxiety. A really good piece of advice I got was to like treat your master's like it's a 9-to-5 job, and to sometimes create boundaries around your schedule and adjust it when it's busier. But that will sort of benefit you. But I think like doing all-nighters has a law of diminishing returns. And the more you, like, sometimes we get into this mindset of like, the more time I put into it, the more I sit in this and do it, the easier it will be to deliver this presentation or hammer out this thesis. But I would say like commit to a plan of well-being. So decide for yourself what's going to keep you mentally and physically healthy, and make sure it's scheduled. So is it meditating, making sure you sleep 8 hours, doing these basics that we all know about, but we don't do it when we're in this crazy hectic schedule, making sure you exercise, be in nature, explore Montreal, connect with your family and friends, eat healthy. Just, those are the basics, but just to be like mindful of it and make sure you have a plan around it, because that will help give you sustainability in your time at McGill.
Absolutely. Sahil?
I think I would have to agree with everything that's been said. It's tough being a student and then also having a life outside of school. I think the choice to go to graduate school, you've already chosen to kind of continue your degree or take time off work and go back to school. So I think it's definitely a big change in your life, and to be mindful of that and be accepting of that in terms of some self-care as well. I think depending on your program, there might be a mix of classes and or lab work. I think Kori mentioned that in the day he would be doing something, but then at night he'd be kind of in a different realm altogether. So I think it's definitely it can get overwhelming at times, and I think it's important to also plan ahead and knowing kind of what's coming up. A lot of what grad school, I guess, was for me was it was kind of unstructured. We had those classes, but maybe only 3 to do over 2 years. And the rest of the time was really unstructured time for you to figure out lab work and projects. So for me, something that really helped was writing things down. I had an iCalendar going. I know some other apps people use is like Notion or OneNote, or just having a physical planner or a lab book to write things down, scheduling things out, but also scheduling time for self-care and time that you're going to be setting those boundaries, and really leaving work kind of when you're done at that 5 o'clock, whether it's a weekend or a weeknight, that you're really planning ahead to see some folks. I know with grad school, it always feels like you're on a general timeline. You're supposed to kind of finish within X amount of time, but I think knowing that your timeline is also somewhat flexible in terms of when you need to finish things, and having a timeline for yourself in terms of what sort of deadlines you want to meet. I think it's always good to look back and see if that's something that you always need to check in with and adjust if you need to. And there's also not one way to do grad school. I had some friends that were student parents, and they were able to access resources through Thompson House, such as daycare. There were friends that had kids throughout their graduate studies and had to take time off for that. There were people doing some of their kind of work at different hours, and I think do whatever works best for you, and make sure that you do take that time for yourself when you need it. And I think one of the great resources that you can access through McGill and through on campus is the counseling resources. And so definitely use the resources that are provided if you are having a tough time and you need to talk to someone, whether it's about your supervisor, whether it's about what you thought grad school was going to be and it's not. I think also having some mentors and peers that you can always chat to, but it's a work in progress, and I think it definitely sets you up for what life after your degree will be. But I think it's always important to kind of set these good habits and coping mechanisms in place.
Thank you, Kori.
Yeah, I just want to echo everything that's been shared thus far. These were really good pieces of advice. It reminded me a lot of, I had a professor who said to me at a time when I was, really struggling with the whole demands of grad school. And he said to me, Kori, I don't know if you realize, but students are people too. And I paused for a second, because I think I had a lot of pressure on myself. I had family pressure in order to perform well. And when you're coming from a foreign country, you got to perform, and you have all that sort of baggage that you're carrying as well. And when he said that, I said, oh yeah, that's right. I'm a person too. I need to think about having an effective balance to be able to maintain relationships, to be able to eat well, to exercise, to live, but also to study. And having that balance is so important. The other piece of advice I would give is whatever could be done early, get it done early. Before coming to grad school, I used to have a philosophy that I was deadline oriented, which basically meant that I waited until the deadline to do my assignments. That's what it meant. That's what it meant. And I learned very quickly that that approach was not going to work. And so I had to learn that, at the beginning of the semester, when I would get dates for essays that were coming up 2-3 months down the line, perhaps it was a great opportunity for me to start doing some of that initial work, so that I can then build in the time that for any other sort of things that would pop up, I had the sufficient of time to take on those additional tasks. And that has actually helped me quite a bit. Working now in the vice president's office, there are things that are popping up every day. And I think it was during that time of me being able to time manage well and being able to do work early that I could get done. It allowed me to have the flexibility to take on some additional responsibilities during that crunch time. So certainly, if it could be done early, get it done early, but always remember the students are people too.
I think everybody pretty much has their own way, and I'm sure that once you've completed a bachelor's and you've started your master's, you pretty much know how you deal with time management and all of that. In my case, I was working full-time throughout, and while I was teaching, obviously I had a different reality than once getting elected, and so the way that I would be able to do both is really at the beginning of every semester, like Kori mentioned, knowing exactly what that course outline was and making sure that I knew exactly when every single deadline was going, when every deadline was going to be, and trying to figure out what my weeks generally look like. So my head was constantly its own calendar, trying to think like, okay, today's Monday, and on Monday nights I have committee until 7 p.m. Therefore, only after 8 am I actually going to get to it. How many hours do I have to work on this? And I was just constantly thinking of how to balance both of them every single week. Definitely did not take the well-being approach. But I don't think it was possible with doing both. And I did take a year off when I first got elected because I felt like I needed to learn what my new role was as a member. And then I did things very slowly, but I did graduate. My last semester was right in the middle of the pandemic. So I did experience a little bit of 2020 when I graduated. And thank God for that, because I had 12 credits in my last semester and I was a full-time MP, and it was absolutely crazy. And I really didn't sleep very much, but this is just how I've always been. So that works for me. I know it's not sustainable, and I'm sure I'll die younger because of it, but it's what got me through, and it's kind of how I've always been. I take on way more than I probably should, and I end up getting it done, but I don't sleep very much. So I don't suggest that, but you do know how much you can handle. And if you know that it's short term and you know the semester is ending in a month and you have this much to do, sometimes you can make the sacrifice because it's coming to an end. And I would also suggest, especially now that you're online and that it's harder to make connections with students in your classes, reaching out to them in some other way and finding a way to make connections with your classmates, because sometimes, you have assignments to do, you have certain, projects, and you don't always want to go back to your professor. And yes, it's great to go back to the teacher, but often you can also collaborate with your peers. And I would strongly suggest even finding ways of reaching out to people that are in your classes to get some help sometimes, and I found that was in my experience great. Not only when we were doing group projects, but people that I met because of group projects, we would go back and forth and say, hey, like, this is what I'm getting out of this analysis. What did you get out of it? Is this what you understood from this article? What did you, And I found that was very helpful. I know that has nothing to do with this question, but it was here, and I just don't know if I'll have an opportunity to raise it again. But that's something that's key during the pandemic, I think, to really find new ways of like reaching out and getting those connections.
Absolutely. And I think that's a really important part of sort of taking care of yourself while you're in grad school. And like Kori said, students are people too. So I think that's really important for all of us to keep in mind, especially during this pandemic. That being said, our next question has to do with supervisors and faculty relationships. So graduate school usually involves working pretty closely with a supervisor if you're in a thesis program, or with another professor if you're in a non-thesis program, as a professional development advisor or as a project manager or something like that. So what advice would you give about working collaboratively with a supervisor and getting the most out of that relationship? And why don't we start with Sahil for this question?
Sure. So I have kind of like an idea in terms of finding a supervisor. I know most students here, if they're already starting a program, would have either came in with a supervisor or have already kind of maybe had one. But something that I was looking for in a supervisor was someone who was willing to mentor me as well, whether that's your direct supervisor, someone on your thesis committee, or someone who you're just working with. I think it really helps when there's someone who's on your side and wants to see you grow outside of school. I think supervisors can be tough sometimes, and there are supervisors that really want you to stay in a program, and especially if you're doing a master's, to maybe do a PhD as well and do a postdoc, and maybe aren't thinking about what your goals are. So maybe thinking about those things in advance and having someone who's on your side, whether it's not your direct supervisor, can be really important. And I think, as Kori mentioned, with students can be humans. I think we also have to remember that our supervisors are humans too. There are a lot of people with complex emotions and baggage, and not every day is going to be the best working experience, and keeping in mind that there are external factors and being kind to someone when maybe things are not going your way. And I think when there are times when things do get a little bit uncomfortable, Graduate and Postdoctoral Studies has a lot of resources for student advocates to really help you navigate some of those difficult times. But I think focusing on the good, always understand that it's not easy to get maybe 6 people in a room if you're in a thesis committee. So being available, being affable, and kind of willing to work with everyone who's kind of on your team, and also being able to learn from their experience and expertise is so important. I think everyone you're going to be working with is going to change your degree in some way, whether it's something that you're going to be more going towards and going to be more like in your future, or something that you maybe think isn't the best way to do something, and you're going to maybe change your own practice and change your own trajectory. So I think that's important. Also knowing that master's programs are short. I think you're going to spend either a great deal of time with a supervisor if you're working very close with them, or you might only see them a couple times in the year when you're going to be working on your thesis. So depending on your program. So you can definitely try and discuss with your supervisor what your expectations might be with them, seeing if there's things that would help you thrive, and also maybe a style that might work best for the both of you. So I think definitely be open to communication and working through the things that might be a little bit difficult.
Zehra?
Yeah, I would suggest that having your relationship with the supervisor is a relationship, and maybe at times you need to have that clarity and expectations when you enter that relationship, in terms of what your subject area is and how you're navigating your research, what your timelines are, what your turnaround times on reviews are, yours and theirs. But most importantly, that you're kind of agreeing to, I think, communication styles. And when I was at McGill, I had a supervisor, and it changed to someone else, and they were very opposite. And one supervisor, it was a different relationship. It was very stressful for me. But, you know, you're in a scenario where your power dynamics are not the same. You know, it's traditional in the sense of a professor is the one who's going to sign off on your thesis and your research and let you have access to the photocopying machine. But all jokes aside, there is a relationship, and we have to be mindful. I think that you're also there to achieve a goal, and they're there as well. So just to be mindful that, you know, that you're an equal partner in this relationship, and you also can guide the expectations.
Emmanuella?
So I would just say, make sure that when you choose who your supervisor is going to be, you choose wisely and that they fit your style. Because, you know, especially if you're balancing a lot of things, you may need a bit more flexibility. And I think that because I chose the supervisor that I did, I had an easier time, you know, getting away with taking a year off or taking a bit longer than I was expecting to submit, let's say, projects. And it was really key to have that relationship and to have her understand what my situation was. So open communication, make sure they're aware of your scenario, your situation. And I find, you know, they're people, you're people, as long as you can come up with some kind of understanding of each other's situations and respect each other, then everything will go well. I'd also suggest getting to know your program director. I was in constant contact with my program director because of, you know, things changed. I was there for so long doing this master's that eventually the courses that I actually needed changed throughout. So I needed to constantly figure out what my goals were, what I needed to finish. And I needed special permissions to register for a lot of my courses. And he was the one that was going to help me get through there. So I became, you know, we got on a first name basis, and he knows exactly who I am now. And I think that that's a really key relationship as well. And figuring out who in the faculty is responsible for what, and having their numbers and emails on hand so that you know who to reach out to get what you need out of these people. I'm not saying that to use them or anything, but just to get your goals met.
Yeah, I'll probably just add that I would suggest connect early, connect often, and really focus on building a relationship. Before I actually came to McGill to do my master's, I had set up some pre-meetings with my supervisor, Dr. Tim Curie, who was at the Faculty of Agriculture and Environmental Sciences. And I remember coming there that summer before, and him and I just spent 2 hours. It was the middle of summer, no one was there. There was no real competing interest. And it was that from that moment, we started to build a really, really great relationship, so much so that he continues to be a mentor and a friend of mine. And so certainly take the time to connect with them early, connect with them often, build that relationship, because these are the individuals who most likely are going to be your reference for your job. It's their network that you're hopefully going to be able to leverage to look at future employment. They potentially could be your mentor, like what Sahil was saying, but if they can't be your mentor, maybe they might be able to identify another individual either in their faculty or perhaps in their network who could potentially mentor you as well. The only other thing I would say is I would suggest using resources like the IDP, so the Individual Development Plan. This is something that McGill has been at the forefront of doing, and the granting councils as well have been suggesting and recommending to students to take advantage of this tool. And it's basically a tool that allows you to have a very structured, empowering relationship with your supervisor. So it walks you through things like, you know, what are some of the technical skills that you should be working on? What are some of the professional skills? What are some of the events or the activities that you should be engaged in? It helps you to map out what network should you access, how to access that network, who did you talk to before, what did you learn from them? And so it gives you a very structured way of engaging with your supervisor, so that by the end of your time during your program, you'd have been able to at least be able to build the building blocks that's required for you to have a successful career. So definitely leverage those tools and connect early and connect often as much as you can with your supervisor.
Thanks Thanks, Kori. And that leads in really well, actually, to our next question. And Sahil, earlier you had mentioned counseling services. Kori, you touched upon the IDP. What are some other services or resources that you found especially helpful? And what do you wish you had first known when you had started grad school? Sorry, Kori, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, sure. I would definitely say one of the resources that I found incredibly helpful was the staff who helped with internship placements out of the Institute of Parasitology. These were individuals who had built great relationships with organizations in Montreal, particularly in the biotech area. And because they had built those relationships, they had invited many of those organizations and their leaders to campus. And so it was a great opportunity for us as students to connect with potential employers. And that's how I got my first internship, which was at the National Research Council Biotech Labs. And from that, I got a great opportunity to work with some incredible scientists, some incredible researchers, and that positioned me incredibly well with my future career. I would say that one of the mechanisms that I wish I had leveraged while I was at McGill was forums just like this. Right, I didn't really appreciate the power of the McGill network, an alumni network, until after I left. So I'll give you an example. So I'm at NSERC, and on my management team, there are 5 deputy directors in our division, and 3 of the 5 of them all came from McGill. One of our 2 vice presidents, one of them came from McGill. And so knowing that you have so many individuals who have gone through programs at McGill and have now moved on and having successful careers, these are individuals that you could certainly tap into to get some advice and to get some perspectives in terms of how to navigating the transition from school life to work life and so forth. So certainly more opportunities to engage with individuals who've passed through, I think, would be something that I wish I had known then, but I'm happy to share that insight now.
Well, we are certainly happy to have your insight. Zehra?
I would say be mindful that McGill has amazing resources on campus. While I was there, I accessed the gym, I learned to play tennis. Those are good stress relievers. Go to social events, take sessions that are related to like information management or like related to graduate studies that might be helpful that the library is hosting. Those are always awesome. One thing you forget about doing when you're doing your master's is that you are part of a benefits plan. I'm not sure if McGill still does this, but go to the dentist. You're paying for it. Use these services you kind of forget about. So I would say just be mindful of the resources on campus and make sure you access it.
Emmanuella?
So a lot of the online resources, the fact that being a McGill student gives you membership to so many online forums where you can get research articles well into your future, because you get to keep that McGill email address and you're still considered a student even afterwards. So JSTOR and so many other different research gates that I can access still that I use at work as well, which is great. And the fact that, I was doing it part-time meant that I was really not there very often. I was there in the evenings. So I didn't really get to take advantage during my master's of the things that were offered and available on campus. But during my undergrad at McGill, I was the president of the McGill Hellenic Students Association. So the fact that there are so many different student groups at McGill, many of the people that were in that group at the time were in their masters, were doing their master's degrees as well. So it's open to everybody. And I strongly suggest getting involved in McGill life and in that kind of environment, because it allows your networks to grow even further than just the people who are in your classes and in your program. It allows you, there are some people that I met at McGill during my undergrad that had nothing to do with my program and who I still consider my best friends. So, just try to branch out, get out there and take advantage of the fact that there are brilliant minds across the campus who are brilliant in many different ways, and try to meet them and continue those relationships.
Great, thank you. Sahil?
I just want to reiterate, I think, what everyone's been talking about in terms of the McGill network and how powerful it can be. For me, when I moved from Montreal to Vancouver, the first person, I guess, that I met up with was my future boss, and she was actually McGill grad as well. So she did her PhD and postdoc here in Montreal and had moved out to Vancouver. So for me, fresh-faced, graduating my master's, no job in Vancouver, she was someone who saw me as a good student, but also knew that my training at McGill had spoken volumes as well. And I think it's some great connections you can make just by leveraging that network. Every city also has a McGill Alumni Association that's in that city. And so definitely reach out to people even after you leave your McGill career. I think some of the great services that McGill offered that I didn't really take advantage of while I was there was the McGill Career Services. The office that's on campus has a lot of great resources for resume building, for interview prep, there's a whole shelf of just books there that I'm sure the folks there can also be really helpful in telling you all about their amazing programs. I think another great resource that maybe you should definitely leverage early on is the McGill Writing Center, especially Graphos. They offer writing workshops and retreats, and especially for your thesis, but even if you're doing funding applications, the director who's there, Dr. Yvonne Hung, is such a gem of a human being and is such a great resource to use. And whether that's looking over something you've written or figuring out how to plan your writing of your thesis, early on, knowing that those services exist are really important. And one thing that I really wish I knew about or had done before finishing my grad program was taking a trip to McDonald campus. So with your student ID, you can take a little shuttle that goes from the Roddick Gates all the way down to McDonald campus. So one day before you graduate, I think it's definitely something you need to do. You need to see Mac campus.
I definitely second that. Mac campus is beautiful. We're going to shift gears a little bit to questions about careers, but before we do that, I'm just going to throw the floor to Nalbantoglu to say some words to the panelists.
So I'm just blown away by our panelists. And I have to tell you that the only one I knew from this panel was Sahil, because we overlapped my first years as a dean, because they were involved in all kinds of things. So, but thank you so much. I feel as though we paid you big bucks to give us this advice that is superb. And it's so nice hearing it from not just me or in my office, but from those who have lived this experience. So thank you so much for this. So we can go on. We still have a whole bit of lots of questions and discussion. So I'm looking forward to the second half.
Yeah, so we'll switch gears a little bit and talk about careers. And just as a reminder, we will have a question and answer period. So if you have any questions for any of the panelists, feel free to put them in the chat box and we'll get through to them once we get through the questions. So the first question is, and as all of you obviously represent, a lot of our graduates go on to have a wide variety of careers. So when it came to picking your careers, what options did you consider and how did you ultimately select your career path? Emmanuella, do you want to start us off?
Sure. So when I graduated from my bachelor's, I became a teacher, and that was what kind of made me decide to do educational leadership, because I didn't necessarily like the way that the admin ran the school back then. I'm not going to mention the school. And so it kind of pushed me. I knew I wanted to go into continuing education, but I didn't necessarily know what exactly I wanted to do. I actually have a background in teaching kids with special needs, and so it was between admin and special ed, and I chose admin specifically because I've always liked being involved in being part of the change, and I find that I had good ideas, and so I wanted to have the background as well. Then I continued teaching, and one day an opportunity arose when my predecessor, who I had worked for about 10 years on a volunteer basis, was no longer the MP of the riding that I live in, that I've lived in my whole life. I had many experiences in Saint Laurent. I taught there, actually. I went to Vanier College in Saint Laurent. I went to high school in Saint Laurent. I went to elementary school in Saint Laurent. I played tennis, swam, did everything in Saint Laurent. And so I had always kind of had this as a goal for one day. Now, I didn't think it would be in my 20s. I thought it would be in my 50s, or, you know, when I retired from teaching, or when I had a family and they were grown up, and like I had very different plans than what actually happened. But I decided to go for it, and I decided to give it my all while working full time and taking one class in the master's level. I expressed to my teacher that I was running in a nomination, and that you know, he basically allowed me to. He knew what was going on. It was like very big in the news at the time, and so he allowed me a few extra weeks to give in my assignments. And when I won, I wasn't able to go back, but I eventually finished my courses and everything on time. So I'm in a field that's completely different, but that I always kind of enjoyed very much. And I said before that I do plan on opening a business. It would be like a tutoring and career development center. And that's something that I see myself doing in the near future, for a small group of people until it gains some momentum, and eventually I can do it full time, because I really like the idea of having my own little baby. Like, and I don't mean that as like a baby. I mean, yes, I'd like children also, but I mean like being able to create something that is needed and that people can benefit from. And I'm interested in seeing where that goes. Have I thought about going back to teaching? Absolutely. I absolutely love kids. Have I thought of going back into admin one day? For sure. But I really do enjoy what I'm doing right now. And it's something that allows me to speak up and to use my voice in the right ways for the right reasons. And this is something I always like to do on the side, but now I'm actually practicing it as a career, and I absolutely adore it. Is it extremely stressful sometimes? Absolutely. Are people always looking to bring you down? Absolutely. But at the same time, if you know you're there for the right reasons, and you know that it feels right to you and what you're doing feels right, then you know you're on the right track and you can just continue. I also wanted to say that there is no wrong career choice. I think that every single experience that we have during or after our graduate degree is going to lend itself to what you eventually end up doing and what you eventually love doing. And if you don't love something, and then don't waste too much time doing it. Find something that you are passionate about, find something that you do love, and find ways to bring your experiences into it and to make yourself an asset in those ways, because you bring so much to the table. Don't be afraid of making the wrong choice, or don't feel like, this is the ultimate decision that you need to make. I'm sure that that our generation is going to go through at least 10 career changes, and that is completely normal, and it's something that you should expect, and it only allows you to gain that much more. So I would just encourage you to go with what feels right and never say no. Even if something seems bigger than what you are, you learn on the job. We're all human. We all have the capacity to do, what we're able to do, and you learn on the job and you get better with time. And it's something that I've felt even in my current career, where I came into it not knowing anything, being thrown into something completely different with experts and people who were celebrities basically to me before. And, for a year and a half, just keeping my mouth shut because I really didn't want to misstep or say anything wrong, to the point where I don't keep my mouth shut at all. And if there's something that I feel and it's burning inside of me, I have to say it, and I have to do my research so that I can bring the best points forward and so that I can be a strong voice for my community. So just do you.
Thank you. Sahil?
Sure. I think when I was considering, or when I was kind of in the process of finishing up my grad studies, I was really at a crossroads. I know for me, I wanted to leave Montreal, and I grew up outside of Toronto, and so the next kind of big city that I wanted to go to was Vancouver, and I had kind of like finishing my degree, no job, no really idea of what the future held for me. So the things I kind of considered were consulting. I think through a lot of the graduate studies, what they advertise as being able to leverage a lot of that knowledge that you have in the way that you think to bring it into the field of consulting. So there was a couple of big companies in Montreal, but also across Canada, like McKinsey and Deloitte and BCG, and there's small other ones that always wanted to have kind of this recruitment from grad studies. And I think that was definitely one way to go. When I moved to Vancouver, there was a huge influx of biotechs here. So using that science knowledge that I had, I was thinking maybe I can go into biotechnology. And also one of the other things I really loved was teaching. And so I started working as a tutor here for a company. So there was a lot of different ways I could have gone. Ultimately, I'm back in school again. I'm doing a degree now in medicine. And for me, I've been so excited with what we're doing and what we're learning. And I know medicine has always been something that I would have loved to do. And now I get the opportunity to do it. And there is so much breadth and diverse experiences that you can take with medicine. So it's always a career that if someone is interested in, I would definitely keep on your list. It doesn't really matter if you're finishing a PhD and are rethinking this, or you're going to do something for 10 years of your life and then go back to school. I think there's never a wrong time to think about something that you love, and definitely go for those big goals. I think also taking the time to leave Montreal and try a new city has been something that has really just helped me explore a new career path. Vancouver's been wonderful, and everyone I met here through McGill networks and through other people that I've met while at my time in Montreal have definitely helped me. So I think some of the questions in here also in the chat box kind of talk about what if you're in a field that isn't really what you want to be doing. I think, as Emmanuella mentioned, it's something that you're using and you will always use going forward. If that doesn't end up being that direct job that you graduate with and are entering the workforce with, I think there's a lot of great transferable skills and soft skills you're going to learn. And at some point, if you think that another program would be the best fit for you, there's definitely ways to transition into different domains. So I think it's never a bad idea to continue in your education, but it's also knowing that certain goals might be best achieved in different ways.
Kori?
Yeah, I guess in terms of selecting a career path, there are sort of four sort of considerations that I would say there, and they sort of intersect with each other. And I think it's trying to find a place and a space where your passions, your values, your interests, and your skills intersect with each other, right? So it's a place in the space where all four of those things sort of intersect. Before I come into McGill, I'd finished my bachelor's degree in biochemistry, and I had worked for Shell in their biofuels department. And so, and I'd worked there for 3-4 years actually before going to grad school. So I had some work experience before I actually entered into grad school. And honestly, when I came to McGill, my impression was I was simply just getting that degree. Because my whole intention was afterwards to go and be a director in some biotech firm, right? I was, it was merely me just getting the paper to represent my credentials so that I can be a director in biotech. Of course, this was during the period between 2009 and 2011. And Zehra, you may remember that period in Montreal as well. It was a time where many biotech firms were downsizing. Merck and Pfizer and a number of the big companies there were not providing the sort of jobs that many of those of us who were at McGill at that time were expecting. But what happened was actually by serendipity. There was a conference, a student conference that happened at McGill, and I think it still goes on. It's called the McGill Science Policy Exchange. It was the very first year that this was created, and it was amazing. They had invited a whole host of speakers, MPs, and they had invited companies and organizations that were involved in this thing called science policy. At the time, had no idea what it was, had no idea it even existed. But by simply attending that conference, I learned about a completely new field that all of a sudden I realized, wow, I had some skills that potentially could align me with an area that I was passionate about, that I resonated with my values, and that I was interested in. And so I took an internship by one of those companies that was in that space. And that internship allowed me to see that those four things actually aligned well with each other. And that certainly positioned me well to having a successful career now in the federal government. And so I would definitely say, try to find a place, a space where your passion, your values, your skills, and your interests sort of intersect with each other.
Great, thank you. Zehra?
Yeah, I had worked with very closely and Access, the Career Center, and I am so grateful to Lorna, who's on this call, because I really needed to figure out how to do it. So when I graduated, and I'll just echo what Kori was saying, there was a downturn in the economy. For what I was interested in, the federal government had rescinded funds from environmental think tanks and reduced federal agency funding. So it was hard to get a job. But I thought, hey, I have a master's from McGill. It's going to be like 3 months and I can bang out a great job. No, I was unemployed for over a year, and it was hard toll on my finances because you just take like jobs to get by. And it was a hard toll on my self-esteem because I thought, well, I did all the work. Now where's the reward? But I would say, a career is a journey, and it will align. It's just a question of when. It's not a question of if. My first job at a university at the time was working for an engineering firm, and it was interesting from that lens because it was an experience I hadn't had before. But I think as I moved along in my career, the question I asked myself is the mission and vision what I'm aligned to? Do my personal values match what this organization is doing? And for me, being in the international development sector has been so rewarding. And also, like, work culture to me is very, very important, more than title or I guess like anything else. It's like being aligned with people, and the culture of the organization I work with right now has that. It wouldn't have been the same at the engineering firm. So it's maybe to do a deep dive in what you value the most as you journey through your career.
Great, thank you. And I think all of that is really valuable advice for us right now, and for folks who are going out into the job market given COVID. So thank you for sharing your insights. With that, our next question is, and I think all of you have touched on this in one way or another, is what kind of skills did you develop or activities did you engage in during your grad studies that helped you prepare for your future career? And Sahil, do you want to start us off?
Sure. So I think there was definitely a lot of skills that I used in my career that I was fortunate enough to learn while in my degree. So part of the work that I did was using laser microscopy, and that was something that ended up being very useful to the next job, even though I didn't think it would be. So it's definitely a lot of the skills that I learned in my master's were really important. I think some of the activities outside of school were probably ones that afforded me probably the best kind of growth and formative experiences. So I got involved in student governance and had to do a lot of public speaking and working with teams and working with a lot of different administrators at McGill, working with different offices. And that's how I met Dr. Nalbantoglu, and kind of getting to know what an organization and especially university institution looks like. I was very fortunate to be able to chair meetings and have teams that I worked with other student leaders, and organize some really large scale events like orientation. So kind of all those things that were really fun to do ended up being really great experiences for me to learn more about myself, but also develop skills. So something that I really wish I had done more, and I didn't really get the chance to do that until I moved out to Vancouver, was get more involved in the community of Montreal. I think thinking back then, I was a little bit intimidated by my inability to speak fluent French, but there's such great organizations in the city that do such great work, and especially right now with COVID, being able to help and volunteer if you do have the time helps you really take that step away from school and really think about what values are important to you and what things that are part of those morals and ideas that you want going into a career. And maybe that is something that changes if you want a more community facing or people facing career. I think with campus it becomes almost like a bubble. And I know now with online school, you're really in a bubble of the people that you're able to connect with virtually. But there's things that are still going on, programs that are still going on in the community that need support. And so I think volunteerism is a privilege in itself, but being able to put yourself out there and taking those risks, especially if you're new to the city or if you've always lived in Montreal and want to do something new, I think it's a great way to get involved.
Great, thank you. Zehra?
I think that environment that my department had which was working in teams and like you have to facilitate like learning something and then teaching it. That's an awesome educational model because you're in that situation where you're going to have to know that content well. You take that into the work environment. You are a problem solver. You're collaborative. You're a partner in problem solving. I think I definitely lean on that. I probably forever will. I also think while you're doing your studies, pursue like those career fairs that are on campus and pursue the access the career center and networking opportunities. And also while we're in COVID, go and leverage your LinkedIn profile and look at people's profiles and have conversations. Don't be scared of picking up the phone and talking to people. I mean, I'd love it if someone calls me and wants to ask for career advice or wants to get into the area I'm in. People are more receptive to it. And I think keep continuing to build networks, even though we're in a pandemic. I think it's okay to do that digitally and make sure that you're connecting with people and learning how they got to where they are.
Great, thank you. Emmanuella?
I'm a very goal-oriented person. So actually, when I was doing my bachelor degree, I was working part-time as a resource aide 20 hours a week at a high school. And I eventually got a job at that high school. And then when I started my master's degree, well, actually throughout, like from the minute that I graduated from high school up until the minute I got elected, I was working on elections, and I was heavily involved in the riding association of my predecessor, Stéphane Dion. And both of these things kind of helped me to get the jobs that I eventually landed. And so I think it's really important yes, school is extremely important, but you need to be well-rounded as well. And you need to think, okay, what are the areas that I would like to eventually get into? And how can I gain experience in those fields? How can I get one up on everybody else so that I'm the chosen candidate and so that I can feel confident that I have the experiences that are required in order to succeed in this? And make sure that you're constantly working on something outside of just school or just work, because as I said, we're constantly evolving and our careers are evolving and changing. And if you just kind of have one idea in your head, then it's going to be very difficult to move from that idea one day when either that job becomes no longer relevant because of technology, or when, whatever the case may be. We absolutely have to be working on other areas of interest. And if you really love doing something, even if it's just for fun, like in my case, politics was just for fun. It was something I would do when I was 17, and my friends would be like, why are you going to this meeting instead of coming for coffee with us? And I'd be like, because it's really cool. Like, I love going to these meetings. And like, you know, it ended up helping me in my career. So figure out, like, you know, how to really play out your hobbies and make sure that you're constantly doing things that you're drawn to, because eventually your career will become things that you're drawn to. And so allow yourself to be drawn to these things and do them while you're in school, while you eventually, you know, kind of establish relationships and network. That's another really big one. The fact that I was in at least 5 or 6 different organizations when I was in university, not necessarily all related to McGill, but different ones within my community, the Greek community, let's say, really helped me gain a lot of support as well, and helped me network. And I know people in so many different fields at this point that even if I wasn't in politics or education, I could probably find a job in a field of whatever I chose. So, and it's not just because of politics, this is because of the networks I had even back when I was in university. So really just try to find ways to get out there and get these people under, you know, get these phone numbers, establish these relationships. It's all about that in the end.
Great, thank you. And just before I give the floor to Kori, this will be our last question. So if you have any questions that you'd like to ask the panelists, feel free to put them in the chat. But we will also be using the remainder of our time to go into breakout rooms, and you all will have a chance to talk to our panelists in a smaller group. So if you have any questions, you are more than welcome to ask them there as well. And without further ado, Kori.
Thanks, Daneese. I would definitely say that there are a lot of skills that I had developed during my time at McGill that I'm using now, both technical and soft skills. So on the technical side, the ability to synthesize and communicate complex scientific information, the ability to manage data, both quantitative and qualitative data. You've heard several of the really good soft skills as well mentioned already, including being a good problem solver and being a good collaborator. In terms of the activities that I was engaged in, as I mentioned, during the time when I was at McGill, there was a huge economic downturn, and a lot of the companies were not hiring students, particularly in the biotech industry. And so a group of students and I, what we decided was to, I guess, be the change that we wanted to see. And so we created BioConnect. And the whole purpose behind BioConnect was essentially for a group of students to come together. So instead of us going to the employer, we have the employer come to us. And so we were able to, form teams, collaborate. We raised well over $25,000 that first year for the conference. We had invited 150 different individuals from industry to come to New Residence Hall at McGill. This was an opportunity for us to have a poster session for all the students. We showed all the scientific work that we were doing. The employers were able to come and ask us questions. And the real reason behind it was just to differentiate ourselves from the competition. Now, funny enough, out of the 16 of us that were in that program, actually only 2 people got jobs directly from that conference. I was not one of them. But what it did do was it did give me an opportunity that when I went to interviews after I left McGill, I was able to share that experience, and that put me well ahead of the pack. Because I was able to say, yes, I have my scientific skills and I could isolate DNA and so forth, great. But I was also able to raise funds. I was also able to problem solve, collaborate, build a team, market, communicate, do logistics, right? Coordination. All of those things were important for employers to see, and it positioned me incredibly well. So certainly, be involved in groups on campus, but if things don't exist, you be that change and you create it. And I think McGill was incredible to create that environment that we had professors and we had administrators who supported us in launching that conference. And it certainly helped to propel many of us into successful careers.
Great, thank you so much. And we've actually been having such a fruitful conversation that we've decided that we'll just continue with this format until the end of our time. So what we'll do is we'll open the floor to questions, and I'll also take this time to ask our co-facilitators to introduce themselves. So with us tonight, we also have 3 current or recent graduates. That's Kemi, Simi, and Tina. So Kemi, if you want to start us off and introduce yourself. And in the meantime, if anyone has any questions for our panelists and for our co-facilitators, please feel free to put those in the chat. Yeah, thank you.
Hi, everyone, and thanks for the panelists. Very informative, even for me. I am a recent graduate of McGill. I did my undergrad in anatomy and cell biology and my master's in neuroscience. I'm now doing my PhD at Université de Montréal. So I was pretty actually implicated while I was at McGill. And kind of did that transition from my master's to my PhD during this whole pandemic. So I don't know if there are any questions about that. You can feel free to ask me later as well. And yeah, that's it.
Daneese, should I go?
I think, Simi, if you want to go ahead, and then Tina, we can do you next.
Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Simi. So I'm a master's student at the Faculty of Law here at McGill. I'm a lawyer, so I newly moved here last year from Nigeria, and I'm currently writing my thesis, and my research borders on food security and human rights. I think I found this, I know I'm here as a co-facilitator, but I'm really grateful that I'm here because I learned so much, and also information that I wish I had known before when I just started last year. So I'm glad to be here. And I'm also with the Teaching and Learning Services, where I work as a graduate skills assistant as well.
Thank you. Tina?
Thanks, Simi and Kemi and everybody. I second what you both said about how this has been really useful, even though I'm a co-facilitator as an audience member. I'm doing my Master's of Education, so same program that Emmanuella did. I know there are a bunch of different streams, so I'm in the inclusive education stream, so also kind of interested in special education. Yeah, so I think that also it would have been helpful to know a lot of these things in the beginning, and especially now if you're starting your program or continuing it during a virtual semester, it's more important than ever to be reaching out via email and in these online conferences. And I know it can be really difficult because of Zoom fatigue, because our classes are on Zoom and everything is on Zoom, but yeah, and I guess to that point, I would also like to say, if reaching out right now to the network feels like too much with classes and extracurriculars and everything like that, the alumni network is still there for you after you finish. So, do what is within your ability in this difficult time. So, yeah.
Thanks, Tina. So again, if there are any questions, you can put them in the chat. You can also just turn on your mic and ask them. But in the meantime, we can sort of just have a back and forth between our co-facilitators and our panelists. So for our co-facilitators, all of you are recent grads or current graduate students. And if you feel comfortable sharing what some of your thoughts, concerns, or ideas are about transitioning from a career after graduation that you'd like to share, that would be great. And then perhaps if our panelists have any advice or would like to share their experiences in regard to that, that would be really nice. So yeah, Kemi, if you want to start us off.
Yeah, sure. So I know that personally, and a lot of students that have been my peers have had kind of similar struggles where you go through school and you feel as though the push is the academic one to become a PI eventually. And when you do embark into grad school, that kind of just feels like it's being reinforced. And then now at the PhD level, you add even more onto that because it seems as though you're going down a single path. which is, I know now, so far from the truth. But even when you know it in theory, it's not necessarily something that you feel can be put into practice. So maybe the panelists could discuss if that was something they had felt and maybe what they did to kind of break out of that stream.
I don't mind starting on this one. I think that I went in there with a goal in mind, and I knew why I was there, and I kind of just wanted to get out of it what I was there for. And so you're right, like McGill has a reputation of being a research institution more than Concordia, for example, which I find, you know, and has more of a focus on finding career paths more for their students than McGill does. And McGill is more about the knowledge and the and having the research done. So I think that a lot of the professors at McGill are, well, they're scholars and they're people who talk excitedly about research, and so you almost do get excited at some points and you're like, oh wow, I can continue and do this and this. But I think it's also important to just like keep in mind what you were there for, and so that you can accomplish your goal. You're using a lot of the courses that you're taking and the projects that you're doing to achieve a goal. And actually, when you apply to your master's and to graduate school, they almost want you to explain how this is going to help you accomplish your goal. And I know that when I wrote my letter of intent to get into grad school, I explained how specific courses were going to help me build the skills that I needed to perform well in my job later on. And so that kind of just always stuck in my head, and then it completely went to waste when I went into politics. But I reshifted and created new goals and got new things out of it. But my goal was never just to be like a long-term scholar. Would I like to go back to school and do either like another master's or a PhD? Or absolutely, like it's not something that I've gotten out of my head, but I would never do it full time because I do enjoy work and you know what I'm doing right now, and continuously building and creating new goals for myself.
I'd like to reiterate what Kori said earlier, which I love, which is that students are people too. And I think all of us at McGill especially are very high achieving and push ourselves to do the best that we can, but we also all deserve a break and all deserve a little bit of self-care.
Thanks, Daneese.
So we've gone.
Great advice.
Yeah, absolutely. Really appreciate it. I think we've gone a little bit over time, so we'll start to wrap up here. I just want to say thank you to all of our panelists for taking time to come speak with us tonight. I know that I've personally found it really valuable. I had a great time doing this, so thank you so much for that. And also, thank you to Lorna and Antonia for planning this event and for bringing us all together here. Had a fantastic time, so thank you for that. And then I'll throw it over to Antonia for some closing remarks.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you everyone so much for being here, sharing your experiences of both while you were at McGill and the diversity that you experience in your career paths. It's really incredible to see and where you've all gone, and for our co-facilitators as well. Thank you for sharing and for being here. And to Dr. Nalbantoglu for joining us tonight. We will be sending you a follow-up email with some of the resources to reach our offices and a recording of tonight's session. So that's it from me. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Daneese, for doing such a great moderation job.
Yeah.
Yes, well
Yeah.
done.
Thank you.
Well done. Have a good night.
Thank you all, and well, good luck in all your careers, though you don't seem to need much help with that. So yes, but your words have been invaluable. Thank you. Good night.
Good luck to all of you on all of your endeavors, educational. He left. All right. But good luck to the rest of you.
Good luck, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Good night.